Um, Hello, everybody. This is Susan. It's disconcerting because I'm looking at my presentation. I'm usually looking at a group of people on the screen using Zoom. And I'm here with, I'm the Executive Director at Disability Rights, Education and Defense Fund. And I'm here with Lawrence Carter-Long, who is our Director of Communications.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
So I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to DREDF for those of you who don't know. DREDF is our acronym. D as in David, R as in, I forget what I usually use, D as in David, R as in red, E as in elephant, D as in David, F as in Frank. And you can find us on the web at www.dredf.org to see all the stuff that we're currently doing and a little bit about our history. You can follow us on Twitter at DREDF, and we're also on Facebook and YouTube and Vimeo. So just to give you a little idea, DREDF is a National Disability Rights Law and Policy Center. We're based in Berkeley, California. We were founded in 1979, and we've had a Washington, D.C. office since about 1981. So in D.C., we have a one-person office, run very well by Carol Tyson, who's our legislative person. Our government liaison is our official title. Here in Berkeley, we have 7 attorneys, 4 education advocates, 2 people who do policy work, and some of the attorneys also do policy work. Lawrence, who does our communications. We have a development director, Ingrid Tischer, and me, and Hong Yu, who does our information and referral, and a legal secretary, Nicole. So I think that's it as far as staff. Our work is primarily in litigation, legislation, and education, and media, which is something else that Lawrence does. I think I might have said we're now 41 years old. We're a cross-disability organization, and we've been, we grew out of an independent living center out of the Berkeley CIL, where we started originally as sort of a paralegal program that then morphed into having attorneys, and we just saw the need. We realized that there was a need for a legal defense fund, sort of in the tradition of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, Women's Legal Defense Fund. We modeled our name after theirs because we wanted to, honor that tradition. And we work with those organizations to this day. So both here in California and in Washington. Anyway, we're really happy to be with you today. We're really happy to partner with CFILC, who we've worked with for a long time over the, since your beginning. I think we've worked on different projects over the years, and certainly partnered on different, supported each other in different legislative activities at the state level. So, that's DREDF. The current project, which you probably know, Christina sent out emails about it, is about the 2020 census. And we partnered with CFILC and all of you and some aging and disability resource centers to get the word out to the disability and the older adult communities about the 2020 census. It's a project funded by the state of California, their census office. So we're really happy to be here today, and I'm the next person, I'm the next thing on the agenda too, so I'm just gonna jump into our presentation. And I'm happy to take questions or comments along the way. If you hear me say something wrong, put it in the chat box and let us know. If you have a question, let us know, or I'm happy to take them at the end also. I will just preface this with saying these are the basics. We're gonna do another training with you later this month on your responsibilities as QACs, as questionnaire assistance centers. But one of the things that we've learned in this project, working with both the US Census Bureau and the state census office, is things are change constantly. What we learn one day is often, unlearned the next day because something new has come out. So just if we learn something today and it changes, we will certainly let you know.
Susan, this is Christina. Welcome everybody. Before we get into the PowerPoint that Susan has graciously put together, can we just take a quick moment to do introductions so that we can account for who is on today's webinar?
That's great. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah. In the north, who do we have?
Brian with Freed in Grass Valley.
Michael with Krill and Hayward.
Donna Reed, CID San Mateo.
Ben McMullen, CID San Mateo.
April and Russell in RAL Sacramento.
Carolyn
EY
Webb,
Marin Center for Independent Living.
Carolyn Webb and Eureka for TCIL.
Christine Fitzgerald for Silicon Valley Independent Living Center.
And Sherry Byrne with SVILC as well.
And Alex Maneri from CID.
Thank you. Anyone else from the north? And in the south, who do we have?
Junie
This
Anderson
is Bobby with ILCSC.
and Jen Griffin from ILRC.
I'm sorry, there were two people at one time. I think I heard ILRC and someone else.
Bobby with ILCSC.
Welcome.
Larry, Ariel, and LaKenya with Skill.
Heather Faust in Anaheim for DMC.
Brian Hollander in Santa Barbara with ILRC.
Letty and Amy, Access to Independence San Diego.
Anyone else in the south?
It cut you out. All you heard was ILRC on the thing. But
And anyone in the central that did not say they are here? Okay, thank you. Susan, I will turn it back to you to start the PowerPoint slide.
Sure. Thanks, Christina. And hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And before I forget, you folks down at in San Diego, on, I believe it's January 23rd at Roberts Day, I'm going to be down there with the United Way. I don't know if you heard about this. It's actually it's focused on older adults, a presentation on older adults, but they were going to check in with you all to see if there might be something we could do in the afternoon on people with disability. So we'll connect, I'll connect with you after the presentation today. I'll shoot an email to you about that. I just didn't want to forget. And to everybody else, we're looking to set up those same kinds of events all across the state. So we'll be, connecting with you about that. So we're on with the show. The United States Census, it shapes your future, and you'll hear why over the next 20 minutes or so. So some of the things we're going to talk about is what is the census, when does it happen, where, who's included, how will it happen, why it's important, and why are we even involved. So what's the census? I wish I could see everybody so I could see if you could raise your hands. We had done a focus group over a year ago now down in Southern California with people from all sorts of who had all sorts of disabilities to find out what they knew about or didn't know about the census. And what we found out was that the majority of people we talked to, which is about 60 people, had never taken the census. Many had heard about it, many had wrong information about it. But what was most concerning was of all of those disabled people, out of 60, I think 11 had ever received the census, and out of those, only 9 had ever returned it. So the rest of the folks had never ever gotten a census in the mail or knew whether their household had gotten the census in the mail. And a lot of those were people with IDD. So they may have been living in group quarters or had supported living situations where the people supporting them may have not shared that a census arrived. So what happens every 10 years, the US Census Bureau conducts a census to determine the number of people in the United States, whether or not they're a citizen. When?
Just quickly, can you just briefly talk about what group quarters means for those that haven't been a part of census conversations?
So that's going to be, I'm going to touch on that later on. So we'll come back to that. And you'll get get the connection. So when it starts on actually March 23rd is when people will first be able to respond to the census, and it'll be conducted through July. Anything after the end of April is about people who have not responded through the month of April. It's called the non-responsive follow-up. But basically, mostly April's the big month. The official kickoff is April 1st. We're not sure why they chose April Fool's Day for it, but they did. And the trivia, first census was held in 1790. I don't know, if any of you are members on Ancestry, you can go and look at the old census information. They release it after, I believe it's 70 years, I think they start to release the information. So the last one's, the most recent, I think it's the 1940 census. Anyway. So where does it happen? It happens in every state and all of our territories. And here's this is an interactive slide. It's kind of a Where's Waldo slide. So can somebody find the wheelchair user?
Yes.
You can put it in the chat box. And Megan, can you let me know?
Yeah, Kyla says the wheelchair user is right around where New Orleans should be on the map.
That's right. And I think there's a couple more in there, like people with canes, but you have to look at it for a little while. Anyway, next. The Gulf of Mexico, that's it. So how do we take the census? Well, for the first time in 2020, it's going to be online, and that's how the Census Bureau wants most people to complete it. And they've assured us that it will be accessible. The National Disability Rights Network, which is based in Washington, D.C., has a direct contract with the U.S. Census Bureau to work out issues for people with disabilities. And one of the things that they've been following up on, because we've been bugging them about it, and I'm sure other people in other states have also, about how are they sure it's going to be accessible? Because when we first asked, we were getting responses like, yes, it's going to be 508 compliant, things like that. And we're like, well, have you used people with disabilities as testers just to make sure? And the most recent response to that was that in late November and December, the Census Bureau used disabled testers on the questionnaire. And that's all we've heard. We don't know what kind of disabilities they had. We don't know what they found or didn't find. We've just been assured that it will be accessible. It will also be, so the primary response that they're looking for is online through the internet, either through your computer, your phone, or your tablet. If you want to, you can phone. There'll be a phone number that you can call to answer questions live with an enumerator. That's what they call the census takers. That you can call, they will ask you the questions, and you can respond that way. If by the end of April, your household has not responded by internet or phone, the Census Bureau will be sending out paper versions of the questionnaire to households. And in person means that if you don't respond to any of those, the internet, the phone, or the paper form, an enumerator, a census taker, is likely to come to your household, knock on your door, and sit there with you and go over the form, if you answer the door, that is. So, that's part of that non-response follow-up period. The questionnaire itself will be in 13 languages. But there will also be what they call language guides, including an ASL and Braille guide, which will be downloadable. And most of them are actually online at the Census Bureau now, which will be downloadable, and they can help. We're not quite sure. It's not the questions will be translated in other languages, but the questionnaire itself will not be. So they can use the guide to, like, here's what question number 1 is in, whatever the other languages, and then, but you still have to answer it in the English version on the form. So it'll be interesting to see what those guides look like. The way you'll get notified. Sure.
We have a question here in the chat. It says, what about people who live in apartment complexes that are enclosed?
So you'll still, if you get, if you have a mailbox in an apartment building, you will get notified. And the way that happens is that the Census Bureau, starting in March, is going to be sending out postcards, and those postcards will be alerting you that the census that you need to answer the questionnaire starting at the end of March. There will be a questionnaire on there, not a questionnaire. There will be a link to the website, like where to go to answer the questionnaire, and you will have a unique code that you receive on that postcard. You don't actually need the code to access the questionnaire. You can go in and there'll be a place to put your name and your address, and it will link to you eventually. So if you don't get the postcard, you can still take the census. So that's how they'll notify you. Except some people, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, if you have a PO box, you won't get notified through your PO box. You will get notified by a census worker will drop off notification at your home. So those of you who are in rural areas, that's worth noting that the census, the U.S. Census, has been going around the people they've hired to rural areas and noting where there are houses without mailboxes, and they've got a list. Like on that rural Route 10, there's homes in these places, and they will be dropping off notifications at those locations. There are special efforts underway by the Census Bureau and local governments to count people who are unhoused. And by that I mean, so if some people who are living on the streets but use shelters frequently are at a shelter on a day where the enumerator is, they will be counted that way, because enumerators will be going to shelters to fill out the census. But if they happen not to be, there's still efforts to know that if there's an encampment in a certain place in your locale, they will go to those. At least in California is really trying to do this, where they will go to those localities and people will take a census form and walk the questions through with them. It's still up in the air whether those people are going to actually count, because the federal government hasn't agreed to what many states have proposed to do. But because California has a large homeless population, California is working hard to make sure that those folks are counted. Group quarters, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, which are places like nursing homes, student dormitories, and prisons, will have a questionnaire dropped off at their dwelling. And they're starting to do this in February. The government's been compiling a list, and I'll talk more about this a little bit later, of group quarters. And so those group quarters will all have one person who will be responsible for completing the questionnaire for everybody who lives there. So for instance, if you're a dormitory, maybe there's the dorm supervisor will be the person responsible for enumerating every student living in that dorm. And then those students are only counted at that dorm. They're not counted at their families' homes. And one of the things, and we'll talk about this more with you over the time, is if anybody living in a group quarter is unsure of whether they've been counted or their group quarters received a questionnaire, they can call the Census Bureau hotline, which I have listed later on. And again, if you don't complete the census online by phone or by mail, a census worker is likely to come to your home. So here's the information about the group quarters. They've been compiling a list over the years. They'll be contacting the administrators, and that count will begin on April 2nd. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't start on April 1st, but it starts on April 2nd. And what we found when we did our focus group was it was likely that many of the people who had never heard of the census, weren't sure if they'd been counted, were people who were living in group quarters. So were there any other questions yet?
Question.
I just want to point out, this is Christina. I'm a regular NPR listener. This morning's report on housing had said that over half of the United States' homeless population is in California.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that's really important to think about when we're talking about wanting to make sure that our people are counted in our state.
Right. I guess there was a question about how do you download Braille? So you can download it, but you'll have to print it on a Braille printer. So only people who have Braille, it's only going to be useful if you have a Braille printer. Okay. So why is the census important? There's really two primary reasons, the political and the financial. So it determines congressional representation. So the more people you have, the more members in the House of Representatives. And of course, California already has the most, and that'll probably continue. And then also reapportionment and redistricting. And that's also very important because how we redraw the lines of our districts matters in politics. So that's why many counties are very, besides the financial hit that the undercount could bring, they're also want to make sure that they get the representation that they deserve and the redistricting and apportionment is favorable to them. It could be that, there might be a census area that has grown, greatly expanded, so its district, just because of the number of people, will be changed. So, the Bay Area or the San Jose area, just areas where there's a lot of growth, may end up with a new district. The financial is huge. The US government sends $80 billion of our tax dollars back to the state each year, or that's what they're expected to in the new 10-year period. And California receives about $76 billion of that now. So we're likely to receive more in the after the next census is finished.
What? 80? And they receive 76?
No,
800 billion.
Oh.
It's a lot. So what are the federally funded programs that matter to us? So they're programs that are crucial to the well-being of families and communities all over California, and especially families who have family members with disabilities. For example, Medicaid, which we know is Medi-Cal, food stamps, Medicare, special education grant from the feds to California.
I'm on the webinar. I should probably switch that.
Section 8 housing, Title I grants, which is if you're, for families who are low income. If your school district gets more funding for the more families who are living living in poverty or close to the poverty line. It's the number of free and reduced lunches that you get at very locally. The state children's health insurance grants are based on our population. Head Start and Early Head Start gets funding based on population. And same thing with highways and roads and planning.
That's true.
So they're all very important things to both disabled and non-disabled and seniors. The census also provides data that the cities and counties use to plan for a lot of things. Where to, especially for out in our exurbs and our suburbs, whether to build new tracks with new roads and all the infrastructure that goes with those. It helps us plan to know if we need to add schools or housing, and especially important for everybody, but older adults and people with disabilities, they plan on hospitals and clinics from the data that they gather from the census. Businesses can also use the data to determine where to relocate factories, offices, shops, all sorts of things. So why is it important for disabled people to complete the census? Well, one, just because we live in California, we count just like everybody else. So for every, it doesn't matter what your status is, it's important to complete the census. But it's also important because if we feel any kind of kindred in the disability community, we want to make sure that those federally funded programs that were mentioned earlier, we get all the dollars we can to make sure that disabled kids get the supports and services they need in school, that we have enough Medicaid matching dollars to provide services to all disabled people and low-income people. Each year, it's been estimated that California receives about $2,000 per person counted in the census. And in 2010, they think we missed 1.5 million Californians. It's conservative count. And at $20,000 per person over 10 years, we missed out on billions of dollars. In the 1990 census was the worst. We know that we actually lost a seat and lost out on billions of dollars. So the state wants to be very careful that doesn't happen again. So why is the disability community a part of Get Out the Count anyway? And it's because we're considered a hard to reach and a hard to count population. And one of those reasons we know is probably just because we're living in group homes. We have a distrust for the government. Lots of reasons we'll go over in a second. But we're not the only hard to count group in California. There are 14 other groups that have been identified as hard to reach and hard to count. And disabled people are part of each of those communities. On the screen, disabled people, older adults, Latinx, African Americans, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, Middle Eastern, North Africans. Children, turns out children are the hardest to count. And the only real good reason that I've seen for that is that the people in the household completing the census don't know they're supposed to count their kids. So it's just like, for some reason, they just get left off all the time. So there's a lot of outreach to families or just people in general to say, remember, your children count. Areas with low broadband or limited access to the internet, they know will be hard to count just because not only do they have that limited access to the internet, they're likely to have PO boxes, so they're not getting their notifications in the mail. And whether an enumerator finds their home to drop off the notice is another reason. And then just getting somewhere to respond. So that's also true of rural communities, Native American and tribal communities who have a distrust of the government, but also may be living in those very rural areas. Veterans have been considered a hard to count group in California. Like I mentioned, people are unhoused, LGBTQ individuals, immigrants and refugees, and people with limited English proficiency. Earlier on, I think many of you had probably heard about the issue with whether there would be a question on the census about citizenship. That question is not going to be asked, but that really, for California, that would have been a disaster because they really felt that people would not respond if that question was there and they were not citizens. So that question isn't there. So if you get asked, no, the question is not there. But immigrants and refugees also know less, or have been less exposed to the census, especially if they're recent immigrants. We talked to immigrants during our focus groups, and even though a couple of them knew about the census, they actually thought it was only for people who worked for the government to respond. So it was just like the education about the census hadn't gotten out there. So why are people with disabilities considered hard to count? So the barriers to participation for disabled people are communication and language, including American Sign Language and plain language. Before, the prior census were mailed or enumerators came to your homes. So you can imagine a census taker who arrives at the home of somebody who's deaf. They were not getting trained on how to work with somebody who used ASL. So that's one of the things in this project we're making sure people are comfortable about. The accessibility of the online form and website, we've been guaranteed they're gonna work, but until we see it, we're crossing our fingers. The accessibility of all outreach and education activities. So we're working really hard to make sure that our materials are accessible, that we're getting the word out. But part of our task under this grant is to make sure that the organizations that are doing all of the outreach to the 14 other hard to count groups understand that people with disabilities are part of their groups. So they need to understand about accessibility and cultural competency in disability. People with disabilities tend to have limited access to the internet. But then there are also some of us who, it's an interesting thing, the internet has also opened up, vast communication for some people with disabilities also. Distrust and fear of the government, just like every other population, there's those of us who are like, yeah, I don't want to tell the government anything. The lack of disability cultural competency among the US Census, the state census office, and enumerators, and the other community-based organizations doing all of this outreach. And then just knowledge about the census, which I alluded to earlier. So on to the questionnaire, and what does the census actually collect? It's pretty basic. They ask the age, sex, whether you're Hispanic origin, your race, the relationships of all of the people in the household, and homeowner status. There's no question about citizenship. So that's I feel like we have to keep reiterating that so people are not worried about taking the census. What the census doesn't ask, it doesn't ask about disability. But every year, the Census Bureau also conducts a survey called the American Community Survey, which does collect extensive information about disability, employment, household earnings, commuting, and more. And if you've ever needed to find statistical data about people in the United States, the ACS is a great place to go when you're writing those grant proposals. I use it often. The other thing people really need to know, and you need to let all the folks that you work with know, the information is confidential, it's protected by law, and there's huge fines if any census workers, they take an oath. Census workers actually take an oath for life, that they will not share anything that they learn during the census. And it's enshrined in law. So it's very important that people know that. They don't collect certain information, and there will be more. There's going to be a campaign that's starting up now from the US Census Bureau that will trickle down to all of us about what to watch for, like fraud. Like if somebody comes to your house saying that they're a census worker, there's certain things that they have to show that prove they're a census worker. So we know that we may have people who are susceptible or seen as vulnerable in our community. So we're going to need to do a little bit of education around this also. So there is a huge incentive for states to get accurate data in the census. We want every person to count. And California is putting a lot of money into an accurate count. And they've built up a structure. And this is what it looks like. It starts with the California Census Office, who we're working for. There is a state complete count committee, and there is a representative who is for the disability community, who is an employee at the Disability Rights California. Then there are California Census regions, which I'll get to on the next slide. And each county has a county complete count committee. And we're going to definitely want each of you to get to know your committee, go to those meetings. Then there's administrative community-based organizations, which are usually, there's more than one in some of the regions and one in some of the regions. It depends on population. And those are the organizations like the United Way, community foundations, who received large amounts of money from the state to then give grants, smaller grants, to community organizations to do work in local areas. So, and I think some of you may have gotten those grants to work in your area. And all these the community-based organizations or the groups are working with those hard to count populations I mentioned. But libraries are all over the census. There's separate work going on in industry specific areas. So education, there's a curriculum for K through 12, a couple of curriculums for teachers to use in schools about the census. Labor has its own whole outreach effort, and there's a huge media effort going on, which I think Kyla and Lawrence can talk about later on. Then here are the census regions, and you can every region has a person assigned from this California census office, and it would be good for you to identify your region and the person who is the representative and connect with them and let them know you're working on this project, because those people are doing this full time and they know everything. They're really helpful. If you have questions about anything happening in your region, like where are other events? Can I join an event? I'd like to distribute our materials at the next event. Those people and the people at the county complete count committees will know what's going on. And here's a place where you can go and get a roster of the complete count committee and the people in your county. So you have this PowerPoint, so you can keep that link and connect with them. If you haven't already, I would reach out to them. I know that I see Michael at the Alameda County, Michael from Krill at the Alameda County county office meetings. Next time, I think it's January 24th, we're going to go over what a questionnaire assistance center is, because you are one. And I'll be sending out iPads to all of you as I receive your signed agreements. I'll send out your iPads, because you'll be using those as a quack, and we'll go over what your responsibilities are. It's a little more, the office is making it seem more daunting than it is. There's just certain rules that you have to follow with putting up signage, things like that. But it's not. It won't be. It'll be straightforward, and we'll make it easy for you. The other big thing for us, and Kyla will talk more about this, is social media. We really want to keep promoting things over social media. We've already started, CFILC has started, especially through Instagram. DREDF doesn't have an Instagram account. This is the one time it's made me think, oh, maybe we should get an Instagram account. But it's a quick, easy, accessible way to get out the word about the census. We will also be sharing with you, if you have a digital newsletter or even a mailed newsletter, we have sample short and longer articles that include information about the census. Like I said, you're going to be a quack, but you're not going to be the only quack in your area. So the census office has told us that by sometime in February, they will have a complete list of quacks. You'll all be on that list, and they'll make that public. So if you're in one part of the county and you want to send somebody to another part of the county, we'll be able to access that list, and you can tweet out or put on Facebook where people in all over your county can go to get assistance taking the census. So that's actually the end of my presentation. Were there other questions?
Thank you, Susan. So while folks are thinking of questions, before we get into contracts submitted and the review of the scope of work that Susan will do, I just want to quickly review attendance and a couple other technical assistance things. So I want to make sure CFILC did ask every independent living center if they wanted to be a part of this effort, and we are very excited that the majority of you said yes, you would like to subcontract with DREDF and work in partnership with CFILC and DREDF to do this census outreach. So we're looking forward to that. I had somebody from DMC, I heard that DMC is here, Skill is here, ILRC, CC is here, TCIL is here, RICV, Freed, Krill, RAL, Access to Independence, SVILC, CID, MCIL, ILRC, and ILCSC. Is there anyone here that I did not name off? So that means we are missing folks from DRC Long Beach, Cal Life LA, DCRC LA, Drail and Modesto, Cecil and Salinas, Rolling Start, ILRC San Francisco, and DSLC. No one's here from there, correct? Okay, so moving forward, that's why we're glad that we are going to be archiving this so folks can come back and look at it. I want to quickly congratulate the about dozen of you that also secured your local and regional census grants and contracts. I know that some of the work that you're doing with this specific subcontract plays into what you're doing both regionally and locally with your grants as well. We will be having reoccurring technical assistance census meetings, and they will be taking over for what used to be the Disability Organizing Network civic participation meetings on Thursdays that encompassed both voting and census as one topic in the Thursday calls. We're going to continue to hold Thursday calls every other week during the census timeline period, but they will be strictly for census, so be on the lookout for that. I will be sending that reoccurring invite to everyone who was either, well, actually, some of you are the lead and the point of contact on the contract doing the work. So either one of you or both of you will receive that calendar invite for the Thursday every other week meetings. That'll be a way to check in, make sure that you were able to get in touch with your regional and local folks from the complete count committees. If you need any assistance, if there's any opportunity to cross over. One of the things you might have quickly noticed for those of you that are on the Zoom online, the map that Susan showed, some of you are very fortunate as where your catchment areas overlap the census catchment areas exactly, but some of you overlap in those areas as well. And so an important point to that is on the census contact sheet that I sent out yesterday and this morning, the last column of that sheet also included the census region that you're working within. So you can see which other independent living centers that are a part of this subcontract work are also within that same region as you. There might be opportunities for us to collectively organize and collaborate and provide outreach and marketing together in those areas. And then we will also be sending out periodic notices about different complete count committee meetings that are happening statewide that you might want to watch virtually. They all connect via Zoom, so you don't have to be in person. We've noticed that they also aren't just holding them in Sacramento. They've been in Fresno and Long Beach, and I think they have one, and they've had some in LA as well. So they are moving those meetings around the state. Folks can have an opportunity to go in person if they'd like, to learn more and to create networks and opportunities, but also you can connect via Zoom and let them know that you need captioning if that's something that you do need. Last but not least, if there is anything that has changed on the contact list, please let me know. I'll recirculate that and do a check-in every 2 weeks when we do our technical assistance calls, just to make sure nothing has changed at your center and that we're still working off the most current information. With that said, this is a very tight timeline. So the census comes and goes very quickly, and I think we all know that the census also impacts the funding that Centers for Independent Living get. So that's another reason why we want to pay attention, and certainly some of the population within our area has changed and could change our independent living center funding after the collection of data is done and publicized. With that, if I see there's a few more questions in the chat, so we'll go to those, and then we'll turn it back over to Susan for the contract scope of work.
Great, thank you, Christina. This is Megan, and Liliana says she is here from DREDF, just having microphone issues. But she had a question, will the iPads be collected once the project is over?
So, Liana, great question, because I also realized I forgot to put that in the agreement, but I didn't forget. I kind of made a decision not to include it. So technically, the state of California told us that any equipment bought under any of their contracts is subject to return to the state, but that doesn't happen very often. It happens sometimes. But they didn't think, because they saw this in our budget, it didn't appear that they were going to ask for the, they've told us it would be very unlikely for them to ask for the iPads back, and DREDF certainly doesn't need 22 more iPads, so I don't have any, I will not ask for them back unless the state asks for them back. So I think we're just we're a blip on their screen, so it'd be hard. I would think that they're not going to ask for them back, but you might just be prepared for that. Keep it in the back of your mind. But if they don't ask for them, we're not going to ask for them.
And just to add to that, thank you, Susan. This is Christina. More importantly, in the contract language, there's certainly some specific rules around what happens if our iPad gets lost or broken. So please make sure that you're reviewing that. We didn't have the flexibility to write in for replacement iPads, so we did budget for the protection equipment and waterproof shells to be put on those iPads, just so we can make sure that we can keep them in the best working order throughout this project. But please, please, please do not lose them. And if you maybe we should have this on a future call or meeting where you can add the where is my iPad or where is my device part of the iPad so that you can track it if you misplace it. We could teach you how to do that at one of our next meetings. Thank you. Go ahead, Susan.
That's great, Christina, because I realize not everybody has used an iPad before, and they will come with a protective case. There's a few, and I figured out the way I got protective cases, and I also got a few, not many, that could come with a keypad. And so I figured the first people who responded, who returned their agreement, I'll ask them if they want the keypad versus the case. And the keypad kind of has a case too. It's not as durable as the others, and there's only a few of them. So, but I could use some funds to buy more if it really became important for groups to have the keypad as opposed to the virtual keypad that comes on the iPads. That said, we'll go into the.
Is there another question, Megan?
No, I don't see any other questions right now.
Great.
And remember, if you guys would like to ask a question on the phone, please dial *9 so we can see your hand is raised.
Right, so just moving on into, I just wanted to know if anybody had questions about the agreement, the subcontract that I emailed to you. I'm happy to take them here, or if they're more substantive, you can certainly just give me a call. My phone number is I'm pretty sure my phone number is on there. But if it's not, it's on our website, or just email me, and you do have my email address. I have 10 of them returned, and I just want to remind, and of all of those 10, I have one group has sent the certificate of insurance. So if you could remember to request that from your general liability group carrier, only because it's one of the things that our auditors watch for. When we have contracts, is to see that we've either supplied a certificate of insurance or collected a certificate of insurance. So if you could remember to do that, that would be great. Of the 10, Christina, you want me to name the ones that I've received?
Sorry, I had you on mute. Yes, if you have that handy, I was trying to pull it up just so people on the phone with us can verify.
Yeah, and if I don't read your name off and you did return it, I'll take because I'm searching by your URL and not your names, because some people from other people from your organizations are returning them. So just to be sure, I have SVILC, ILRC, DRC, DCRC, SCIL, DSLC, CalLife, ILRSC, MCIL, and DREDF have returned their agreements. Did I miss anybody who's on the call? Okay, it looks like that I've caught everybody so far. And a couple of you have said that you would be getting back to me at the end of this week or next week. So that's great.
And then Susan, if you could just quickly go over the reporting and invoicing.
So when you return your agreement, you can turn your first invoice, and that will trigger your first payment. The second payment will come when towards the end, the final 5%. So the first payment is $5,400, and then it's $1,800 by September 30th. But that's the target date for your final report. But you can likely get it to me before then if we are not doing. It really depends on the non-response follow-up, like how much follow-up the state of California determines we have to do. So it could possibly come sooner. The tasks are, I'm getting to the task page, are really, and I think that I tried to capture them, and they're very broad because I think that there are going to be things that you think of that are appropriate for your areas that you will want to do, and you're happy to do, send that information to Christina and I, and we will work with you to make sure that, that anything that you want to do is possible, or most things that you want to do is possible, and might be better substitute for some of the things we've asked you. We know for sure that you have to be a quack. That's one of the main reasons the state really liked our proposal because we actually had a statewide network, yay ILCs, to go to make sure that people with disabilities and older adults would have a place to go where they could get assistance. So you're definitely going to be a quack. Our language capabilities, I shared with all of you a link to a Google Doc where you can put in your languages. That's also very important to the state, and I really appreciate those of you who emailed me back and said that even beyond the languages that you have in-house, that you'd be willing to use interpreters, a telephone interpreter service, and that's what DREDF is going to do when we run into those things. We're using, we'll be using, as we develop more and more materials for we can do Chinese and Spanish here at DREDF, but we will also be doing some other languages in translation. So we are happy to share. All of that stuff will be going up on that disabilitycounts2020.org in the resources section as we get them up, and in many languages, so you can watch for those. But they just also, we wanted to make sure that if people walk into your quack and they speak Tagalog, that you will be able to help them in some manner. And there are the telephone language interpreter services are they're instant, they're on demand, and they're not very expensive. So I just wanted to encourage you to use those if you do have people who come in who use a language that you don't have in-house. Participate in these online trainings like this with DREDF and CFILC, but also when we send out a link that the state of California is having a training or a meeting that might be of interest, or the US Census is going to have a training, or another community-based organization, take advantage, because when this project is all about networking and outreach. That's really what it is. And so I'm sure you all have strong connections already, but I think this is also a great chance to build them. Participate in these semi-monthly calls with DREDF and CFILC, but I guess Christina gave you a Thursday. We're going to take over one of your calls. Let's see. Participate in regional convenings or local convenings. Like I said, I'm going to be down in San Diego in a couple of weeks, and I'd love to have, is it A2I who's in San Diego? Did I get that right? Yeah, that I'd love to connect with you guys while I'm down there. But I want to go to Eureka too. So, so we want to be able to reach out and have community forums, or go to a farmer's market with you, or wherever you think might be a great place to do more outreach. We have a travel budget, and we'd like to use it on these activities. Subscribe to different digital newsletters about the census, and we'll be sending out a list of all of the ones that we know about. And not all, but many of the county census committees have listservs where they just send out information. And so I would say join those listservs. And your state representative may have one also. Collaborate on any of the regional trainings. Provide your own kind of training. So I know that, for instance, many of you have weekly or semi-monthly housing workshops or benefits workshops, or AT workshops. It'd be great if you could tag on to those. That's what we mean on number 8, to add something about the census. And if it's something that you'd like us to work on, to build like a mini training for you, that we can provide, sort of the basics, and then you can fill in the local information, we're happy to do that. So, and I'll connect with Christina and everybody at CFILC about that. And then just identify all those things that happen in your community that you're already connected to, or that you always wanted to be connected to go do, to hand out flyers, to talk to people about the census, go talk to if there's so for instance, at the end of this month, and then again I'm doing a presentation to the Oakland Mayor's Office on Disability. Next month, I'm doing one for Berkeley. I know that ILRCS is probably doing stuff with the Mayor's Office on Disability in San Francisco. So connect with your local public agencies and, you know, tell them that you are part of this project and you want to be involved. We have a campaign coming up, a social media campaign. That's one of the things I mentioned and that Kyla and Lawrence will talk to you more about. But our first campaign to get out the word is Ed Roberts Day. Or there may be one right before that about a set of videos that we had made with Rooted in Rights that we'll be releasing towards the end of January. Disseminate materials that we give to you. Like I said, we've already developed one newsletter, digital newsletter that was aimed at families because DREDF holds a parent training information grant. And so we have that in English and Spanish, and I'm happy to send you the source for those if you have a listserv. And we'll be doing one that's more general for people with disabilities and older adults. Right, Lawrence?
That's right.
Yeah, he's developing that right now. During the non-response follow-up period, we're just going to have to, you know, in a way we have to play that by ear because we don't know how much non-response there is yet. But there will be some, and we'll be developing materials that are targeted toward the people who have not returned the census. And then the other thing is, and I'll be sharing another document on Google Drive, is we are required to give the census office information about all the activities that we conduct, minor to major, under this grant. And they're doing it because they want to track outreach by census tract. So I need this document will have like your date, where it happened, the zip code, about how many people were there, what kind of information you gave out, that kind of thing. So I'll be sharing that with you this week, a new Google Drive. And I'll make one specifically for your center so you can enter information. So those are the major activities. And like I said, we know that you'll probably think of other things and have great ideas that we didn't think about. And, you know, these calls that we have will be an opportunity, you know, we'll have one that's more interactive. But always, if you think of something, just email us. We want to hear from you. So that's about it on the activities. Unless, Christina, did I miss anything?
I think you hit it all. I have a couple additional reminders and things that are important to share. One, thank you, Keith and Yolanda, for joining from Cal Life. I got your email and have you accounted for. In addition, Susan has mentioned that we are also targeting older adults / seniors. And through our budget revision, we were able to find funding to give a small portion of funding. I mean, you're all receiving a small portion of funding to do the outreach work for census as it is, but those of you that the state has recently redesignated as aging and disability resource centers will also be receiving a small amount of money to assist in specifically reaching out to older adults / seniors. I tried to get that information prior to this meeting, and Department of Education will not be releasing it until their ADRC advisory committee on Friday of this week. So you know who you are, and if you don't know who you are, I will be reaching out to you after Friday's announcement to let you know that there's some additional funding coming your way to reach out to older adults.
Right, and you'll get an agreement as an ADRC.
Of course. And with that, I also just want to point out which CFILC staff are working on census-related deliverables. So I'm going to introduce Kyla Aquino Irving next to talk a little bit about our public awareness efforts. She and Lawrence at DREDF are working in collaboration on a lot of our marketing and outreach materials that all of you will be able to use, steal, and edit as much as you'd like. So while Kyla is our marketing and public awareness, or marketing and communications director, we also have Vanessa, who is one of our youth organizers who will be working on census, myself, and then when we find a statewide community organizer replacement. That person would also be coming in to work with the census team at CFILC. I don't think most of you know him, but our graphic designer and webmaster, Jose, will also be behind the scenes helping us out with census related work. I think that's all I wanted to mention. I'm going to throw it over to Kyla, who I know wants to share some stuff and let you know when the first outreach and marketing meeting will be.
Wonderful. Can you guys all hear me? This is Kyla. I'm going to assume so. I'm hoping. It looks like I'm not muted, so here we go. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and let's see. Let me make sure everyone can see that. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen, and it should say I count and with a blue design there.
It was on, Kyla, but it just jumped off. I'm not sure why. It says we are sharing your screen, though.
Okay, let me see.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. You can see this. So there's a young Asian American woman holding a sign that says I count. This is taken from one of the activities or one of the events that we had a table at. It was Abilities Expo in San Mateo. We are hoping to do more of these sort of photos and sharing what our community looks like, since our community, the disability community, is in all of these communities that they're calling hard to count. So disability, as you all know, exists in the Asian American community, African American, Latino, Latinx. So you know, we want to make sure that we are sharing photos of people in our communities. So we make sure that the disability count is really representative of who we are. So with that, I want to make sure we talked about tracking our social media. And the best way to do that is just to make sure that every single tweet or post on Facebook or even LinkedIn includes our hashtag, which is DisabilityCounts2020. And as Susan mentioned, we're going to be sharing a lot of different toolkits and resources. I know we're pretty limited on time, and I'm not going to be able to go over all of the things that we'll provide for you. So we will have a follow-up webinar specifically just for communications and outreach. And that webinar, I'm going to share the details in the chat once I get back in there. But that, if you could save the date, that's going to be January 30th. That's a Thursday. Lawrence Carter-Long and I are going to be co-hosting that. So that's January 30th at 10 a.m. We're going to go ahead and run through our social media toolkit, as well as help launch some of the materials such as our video campaign. Our videos are going to be in English, Spanish, and ASL with captions, of course, and image descriptions. We're working on additional website resources that you can use to share with your communities on our website as well. And the website is disabilitycounts2020.org. And then also save the date, February 5th, we're going to have a Twitter chat, which is facilitated by Alice Wong at the Disability Visibility Crew. As you know, they had a very well-attended presidential candidate Twitter chat. So we're hoping that we'll have a nationwide attendance for our Twitter chat on the disability community and the census. But I just wanted to make sure I hit those points that we're saving the dates for certain events, and we will have more materials for your participation and things for you to share. If you can see my screen, we also are part of this low-cost internet campaign, since the 2020 census will be available online for people to complete, and one of those barriers for disabled people is not having the broadband to get online to do the things that we need, which includes getting counted for the census. So for this particular project, we're hoping to encourage people to get online, and for these messages, we're using the hashtag #GetConnectedGetCounted. And I will make sure you have more materials and information for that during our January 30th webinar.
And with that said, I just want to also point out that if anybody is unfamiliar with our digital access project and would like material sent to your ILC, let us know. We're happy to send you that information. It is open to everybody across the state of California. And like Susan said, getting counted online is a big push and big change this year. So we are happy to help people connect to the affordable internet offers available.
Thank you. Is there anything else I might have missed, Lawrence or Susan or Christina? All right, any questions from the group? Otherwise, I can make sure I have my email address in the chat box so that you can send me questions directly, give me a call, whatever you need. And then hopefully we'll also go over a lot of those questions in our upcoming webinar. Since if one person has that question, it's very likely that other people are thinking of the same question.
Hi, Carla, this is Susan. I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a list of all of the social media accounts that all you ILCs have out there?
I have been squirreling away all of these social media handles and things, but I would love to share it with everyone so that they can give me updates, because I know things change a lot of the time, or the names of handles change. So I'm happy to send that out to the group, and then you all can send updates as needed.
Thank you.
And in addition, Allie is with me in the room, and she's sharing that we also have a number of resources and tools that the systems change advocates and community organizers have been talking about and working on that are on the Disability Organizing Network website. And Susan, we also have our Census 2020 website too. Do you want to give that web link again? Because I know we're continuing to grow and build that. I'm sorry, you were asking for the web link for disability counts, or?
Yeah, it's disabilitycounts2020.org. And that's also our main hashtag too.
Keeping it simple. Easy to remember.
So I'll put that in the chat box.
I just did. Maybe I should include the HTTP so you have that too.
Yeah, I think it'll get them there.
And it looks like in the chat box, Bobby has also let us know that we didn't report that his contract was submitted, but they did submit it. So
yeah, I saw that. I sent him I'll check. I'll look. I'll just check for that.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes my presentation. Unless Lawrence has anything to add.
No, you've covered the bases. I look forward to doing a deeper dive on communications and outreach on January 30th. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, well, we have a number of next steps and upcoming meetings that will be happening. Susan will be sending out some follow-ups around contracts that haven't been submitted yet, as well as some reporting tracking sheets. Kyla and Lawrence will be holding an outreach and public awareness specific webinar. Kyla will be sending out the social media handles to be reviewed for updates. And we will be holding our next QAC and QAK training webinar on the 24th, Friday. I will be sending out that Zoom information for that training. And then the points of contact will be meeting every other Thursday to do a check-in and technical assistance call. Did I miss anything for next steps?
Man, you're good.
All right, well, with that said, thank you all very much for joining. Again, we look forward to working with you. And if you have any questions to send in, feel free to do so. And I appreciate you guys staying online with us as we went over a little bit. Thank you.